I'll start by telling you something that'll probably make you second guess ever taking a night shift job again. It's the kind of story that keeps you awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what's really out there when the lights go off. It was supposed to be just another routine shift. One of those mind-numbing hours you fill in a dark office, sipping coffee and flipping through paperwork. But it turned into something else. The first warning signs started when I walked into the office that night. I'm Jake, 32, a regular IT guy. Night shifts? They were my thing, quiet, alone, no distractions. The office was almost empty, like always. I was just a little early, but that was fine. Everything was usually calm. However, there was one thing I noticed immediately as I stepped into the building. The lights flickered, nothing major, just a few brief stutters. I figured it was the aging infrastructure of the building. But then, the air felt heavy, like a strange chill settled in the hallways. The rest of the team was already there. Chris, the night manager, had his usual half-empty cup of coffee beside him as he tapped away on his computer. Jessica, who worked in HR, was at her desk, scrolling through files. Everything was ordinary until it wasn't. Around midnight, as the clock ticked into the early hours of the morning, I started to hear things. Little sounds, nothing too alarming at first. Whispers that seemed to float through the hallway. At first, I thought it was just the old pipes or the hum of the air conditioning. But then it started to get closer. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, like someone was walking just out of sight. I looked at the others. They were absorbed in their screens, oblivious to what was happening. But the whispers, they were growing louder now. And the footsteps, they weren't just in my head. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway flickered again, this time longer. The office went pitch black for a moment, and when the lights returned, I swear I saw something standing at the far end of the hall. A shadow, no, it was too dark, too unnatural. I thought it might have been a trick of the light. Maybe my eyes were playing games. But I wasn't so sure anymore. Did you hear that? I asked, looking toward Chris. He barely looked up from his screen, giving me a tired, distracted smile. It's just the old wiring again, Jake. Nothing to worry about. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was very wrong. As the minutes dragged on, I couldn't stop glancing at the hallway, expecting to see that shadow again. It felt like something was watching me, waiting for me to look away, like a game of hide and seek that I didn't sign up for. The whispering never stopped. More like a constant buzz in the background now, making it hard to focus. It wasn't just the walls creaking or the air conditioning anymore. It was something more, deliberate. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just my nerves. I had been pulling late shifts for weeks, and the lack of sleep was starting to catch up with me. Still, I couldn't ignore the strange sensation crawling under my skin, like the air itself had thickened with unease. Around 1:30 a.m., I decided to get up and stretch my legs. The rest of the team was still glued to their monitors, and the room felt unusually still. I was just about to walk down the hallway to grab another cup of coffee when the lights flickered again. But this time, it wasn't the usual blink and you miss it kind of flicker. The entire building seemed to pulse with it, like the light itself was breathing. I froze in my tracks. The air felt colder, and the buzz in the back of my mind grew louder, almost like static in a radio. That's when I heard it. A voice, low and distant. Jake! I whipped around, my heart racing. No one had said my name. Everyone in the office was still in their seats, lost in their screens, completely unaware of the growing tension in the room. My hands were clammy as I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no texts, but I could still hear the whispering. It was now unmistakably clear. Jake! I backed up toward the door, my pulse hammering in my chest. The hallway outside was dark, but I could make out the faint outline of something. Someone. Standing at the far end. It was a man, tall and thin, dressed in a black suit. His face was hidden in shadow, but something about him seemed wrong. His presence was cold, almost as if the air around him had frozen. I blinked, and when I looked back, there was nothing there. I knew I had to say something. My voice was shaky as I turned toward Chris and Jessica. trying to keep the panic out of my tone. "Did you hear that? Someone's out there. Someone's in the building." Chris didn't even lift his head. "You're imagining things, Jake. It's just the usual late-night weirdness." But Jessica, she had stopped typing. She wasn't looking at her screen anymore. Her eyes were wide, staring at the same spot where I had seen the figure. Do you hear that?" she asked quietly. It was the same whisper, but now it was louder, closer. We could all hear it, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop as the shadowy figure began to emerge again from the darkness, just beyond the reach of the office lights. This time he took a step forward, and then the lights went out completely. The silence was deafening, the kind of silence that presses in on you, thick and suffocating, like it's waiting for something to happen. I could feel the cold creeping into my bones as the room plunged into complete darkness. The hum of the air conditioning cut out, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breathing. I fumbled around for my phone, the screen casting a faint, trembling light. My hands were shaking as I tried to turn on the flashlight, but it didn't come on. The battery was dead. "Chris? Jessica?" I called out, my voice sounding alien in the thick quiet. I couldn't even hear their breathing. It was like they had disappeared. Suddenly, there was a soft rustling sound to my left. I froze. I thought I heard footsteps again. Slow, deliberate, and far too close. My throat tightened, and I backed up toward the wall, pressing my back against it for some kind of security. Then, from the blackness ahead, I heard a whisper, this time so close it felt like someone was standing right next to me. "Jake?" My breath caught in my throat. That voice, it wasn't Chris, it wasn't Jessica. It was deeper, hollow, almost like it was coming from within me. The voice felt wrong, like it had been waiting for years to speak, and now it was finally being set free. I didn't dare move, couldn't. Then the lights flickered again, just for a second, but that was enough. In the brief flash of light, I saw him, the figure, the man in the black suit. But now he was right in front of me. His face. God, I'll never forget his face. It was pale, almost ghostly, with hollow eyes that seemed too dark, too deep to be real. He didn't have any expression, not even a hint of emotion. It was like he wasn't a person at all, just something pretending to be one. The lights flickered once more, and the shadow moved, closer. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't even blink. It was like my body had stopped responding. "Jake?" The voice rasped again, but this time it came from the figure itself. His lips didn't move, yet I could hear it so clearly, as if it was coming straight from inside my skull. I stumbled backward, hitting the desk behind me. My hands were scrambling, reaching for something, anything. I had to get out, but the figure didn't move. He was waiting, watching. "Get out of the building." The voice came again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just a whisper, it was a command, and I could feel it. It wasn't just his words. It was something else, like a force that was pushing me, urging me to leave. I didn't hesitate. I ran. I darted past the empty desks, heart pounding in my chest, and bolted for the exit. But when I reached the door, it wouldn't open. The handle jiggled under my grip, but it felt like someone was holding it shut from the other side. I pulled harder, desperation surging through me. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to get out that way. I turned back toward the office, my mind racing. I couldn't be alone in here. I had to find Chris and Jessica. They weren't answering, but I had to make sure they were okay. I ran down the hallway to the break room. The lights flickered again, casting long, unnerving shadows. And that's when I heard something that chilled me to the core. A low, guttural laugh. It wasn't human. The laugh echoed down the hallway, bouncing off the walls in a way that felt completely unnatural. It wasn't the kind of laugh someone makes when they find something funny. It was cold, distant, like it was coming from something that had no place in this world. I froze in place, my heart hammering in my chest. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dark and silent except for the faint buzz of the dying fluorescent lights overhead. The sound of the laugh was so clear, it felt like the thing was right behind me. I whipped around, expecting to see something, someone, but the hallway was empty. The laugh came again. It was low, almost guttural, but there was a hollow quality to it, like it was coming from a deep well. A deep, empty place. And then the whispering started again. This time it was different. It wasn't just a disembodied voice. It was a chorus. Many voices, layered on top of one another, all speaking my name, each one getting louder, more desperate. The voices seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jake, I spun around in a panic, eyes wide, trying to see where it was coming from. But there was nothing. No one. Suddenly, I felt a chill sweep through me. It was colder than anything I had ever felt, like a gust of icy wind that had come out of nowhere. My breath came out in visible clouds, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I didn't know what I was running from anymore, but I knew I couldn't stay in this building. Whatever was happening, whatever was lurking in the darkness, wasn't normal. It wasn't just some trick of the mind or an old building playing games with me. Something was here, something that wasn't supposed to be. I sprinted back to the office, my steps echoing in the silence. Chris and Jessica had to be there, right? They had to be. I had to find them. When I burst into the office, I found them both at their desks, just like I left them. But something was off. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide open, staring at nothing in particular. They didn't move, not even when I shouted their names. I reached for Chris's shoulder, shaking him, but his body was unnaturally cold. Chris, Jessica, what's going on? I called, but neither of them responded. I looked around desperately. The room seemed to stretch and warp, like I was seeing it through a distorted lens. The walls were darker, the shadows deeper, and then I heard it again, the laugh. It was louder now, coming from behind me. I turned around slowly, my eyes widening in horror. It was him, the figure in the black suit. He was standing in the doorway of the office, his face still hidden in shadow, but I could see his eyes now, those hollow, empty eyes, and he was smiling. His mouth stretched too wide, too far, and the grin was so unnatural, it made my stomach turn. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen, my mind screaming for me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. The laugh grew louder, and I realized it wasn't just his laughter. It was the voices of the others. Chris, Jessica, they were laughing too, but it wasn't their real laugh. It was a twisted, broken version of them. Jake, the figure said, his voice somehow deeper than before, and this time it wasn't just a whisper. It was all around me, wrapping itself around my thoughts. You're not leaving. Not yet. I turned and bolted for the back door, pushing through the thickening air, the laughter ringing in my ears. Every step felt like it was taking me deeper into some horrible nightmare. My mind raced as I slammed into the back door, but it wouldn't open. The same force that held the front door shut was now pushing back against me. I had no idea what to do. I was trapped. There was no way out. And then I heard it. A voice. Chris's voice. Jake! I spun around. But it wasn't Chris. Not anymore. It was the figure. His mouth stretching wider, his voice mocking, distorted. Felt like everything was closing in around me. There was no escape. The figure took one slow, deliberate step toward me. And then the lights went out again. Complete darkness engulfed me once more. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, fast and shallow, as I fumbled to find something, anything, that could help me. My mind was racing, but all I could focus on was the oppressive silence, the cold, and the faintest echo of that laugh, still lingering in the corners of my mind. The shadow had to be right there, just a few steps away. I could feel it. The chill in the air grew even more intense, as though the building itself was breathing, sighing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. My hands were slick with sweat as I scrambled to find my bearings, but every direction felt the same. The walls seemed to close in, the hallway stretching endlessly in front of me and behind me, distorting, bending. Nothing was right. And then, just as I was about to lose it completely, I heard a voice. This time, it wasn't the figure's. Jake? It was Jessica's voice, but but it sounded broken, empty, like it was coming from somewhere far, far away. I whirled around, desperate, trying to locate her. The air around me was thick with something. And it felt as if something was pulling at my chest, tightening with each breath I took. "Jessica," I whispered, barely able to make the words sound normal. But then there was a sound behind me, a footstep, slow, deliberate. I froze, and there he was again, the figure in the black suit, standing in the center of the hallway, now only a few feet away from me. His eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, locked onto mine, and I couldn't look away. The smile, that awful smile, it stretched impossibly wide, like a grotesque mask, too large for a human face. "Don't look away, Jake," he said, his voice like an old crackling tape recorder. "You have to look at me." I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by that gaze. The darkness around me seemed to pulse, and I realized I wasn't alone in this hallway anymore. There were others. Their faces appeared from the shadows, slowly materializing. Figures, ghostly, transparent, but unmistakable. Chris and Jessica. They were standing there, staring at me, their eyes lifeless, their mouths hanging open in twisted, silent screams. "No!" I gasped, trying to step back, but I couldn't. There was nowhere to go. The hallway seemed to stretch infinitely, and the walls closed in. I was trapped. The figure took a step closer. He wasn't walking, he was gliding, floating just above the ground, as if the air itself was moving him. His smile never faltered. "You wanted to leave," he rasped, his voice cold. "But there's no leaving here. Not for you. Not for anyone." And then I saw it. A glimpse of something so horrifying, so unspeakable that I almost couldn't comprehend it. Behind the figure, through the shifting darkness, I saw another hallway. A hallway that shouldn't have existed. It was long and dark, but it was different. The walls seemed to pulse, as though something was alive in there, something waiting. And I could see, in the far distance, more figures, more shadows moving toward me. The figure in front of me spoke again, his voice now low and guttural. "It's all just beginning, Jake." I wanted to scream, to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. The laughter, the whispers, they grew louder, drowning everything out. And then, for the first time, I felt the weight of the darkness pressing down on me, pulling me in. It was suffocating, like it was consuming everything. I couldn't escape. As the figure stepped forward one last time, I realized something. I hadn't been alone in this building the entire time. This place wasn't just haunted by spirits. It was something older, something worse. And now it had me, but I wasn't going to die here. Not yet. I closed my eyes, summoned every last ounce of strength I had, and in that final moment before everything went black, I heard it, the door. The back door, the one that had been locked. It was opening. I stumbled forward, my body numb, my mind frantic, the voices roaring in my ears. But I was running for my life. The last thing I saw was the hallway stretching out before me, the shadows chasing, closing in, and the figure's voice fading into nothing. And then nothing. The door slammed behind me. I didn't know if I'd made it out alive, or if it was just the beginning. But I wasn't going back there. Not ever. But sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear that laugh. And the whispers. When I stumbled out of that building, I thought I was free. I thought the nightmare was over. But the truth is, it never really ends. Can't. Once you've seen it, once you've felt it, it follows you. There's no escaping that kind of darkness. The thing is, the doors did open. I made it out. But as I stepped into the night air, everything felt wrong. The world felt distant, like I was no longer part of it. The sounds of the city, the hum of the streetlights, it all felt muted, like I was hearing it through a thick layer of glass. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how many times I replayed it, I couldn't find an explanation that made sense. I remember walking to my car, the cool night breeze hitting my face, feeling almost unreal. like I was still caught in the last vestiges of a nightmare. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the keys. I didn't want to look back at that building. I didn't want to see the dark windows, knowing that whatever was in there was still there, waiting, watching. But when I got into my car, something made me glance up at the office building one last time, and that's when I saw it. The lights were on. All of them. Every floor lit up in an unnatural, harsh glow. And at the top floor, I saw something moving in the window. A figure. Not just any figure. It was the same one I had seen in the hallway. The man in the black suit, standing tall, his face still hidden in shadow. But this time he wasn't smiling. His eyes were wide open, and I swear, I could feel them on me even from this distance. His gaze pierced through the glass, and he knew I was watching. My heart nearly stopped. He was still there. He hadn't left. And then, as if he was waiting for me to see him, he raised a hand and slowly, deliberately, waved at me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was as if time itself had stopped. But I couldn't tear my eyes away. I was trapped in that moment, in that stare. And then, just as suddenly as the light had flared up, it all went dark again. No lights, no figure, nothing. But I knew deep down it was just the beginning. That thing, the one in the suit with those hollow eyes, it wasn't just in the building. It was attached to me. It was following me, waiting for the right moment to come back. And it's still out there. It doesn't need the building anymore. Can find me wherever I go. Every night I hear the whispers. They're quiet at first, but they get louder, closer. And I know now that there's no escaping it. There's no running from something that lives in the dark. Something that feeds off your fear. That's how it works. You can't leave. Not when it knows you. Not when it has seen you. So here's my final warning. If you're ever working the night shift, alone in an old building and you hear those whispers, when the lights flicker, when you feel the chill in the air, you'd better listen. Because whatever is out there, whatever I ran into, is still waiting. And it will find you. Just don't look back. Whatever you do, don't look back.